Have you ever been in a town or a city and had no rent? I mean, no place to stay. That means you're not paying for a hotel. You don't have a place like an apartment that you pay for the rent, and you are there in the town. Have you ever had that happen? If you have, probably the first thing is you'd be with friends. Friends of yours are letting you crash on their couch, or they are like, yo, you can stay in this room till my friend gets back, but then when he gets back, you gotta do. Or they're even saying, you can tent out in my backyard because the weather's not bad, or some such thing. Or you're going to services, that is somebody in the town who can maybe help you. Now, the difference between those two things is the sort of center of the whole conversation. Have you ever been without a place like that? Think about the times you've been without a place, and somebody helped you out, and you're like, oh man, thank you so much, you bailed me out. I just want everyone to consider that time in their life. When people meet me, they assume because of my diction, the way I talk, that I'm wealthy or I come from wealth. I mean, we were not wealthy. And when we came to the United States, we were regular middle-class immigrants. My parents worked for state institutions, right? State colleges, state high schools. I went to public high school, public elementary school. I did everything my suburban classmates did and have turned out totally differently because of who I am. But anyway, and I was thinking to myself, okay, so suppose you made an inventory after a long time, like I'm about to do right now. It's taken me 2.5 minutes to get to the point here. This is the MTK podcast, number 1. Today is the 30th of October on the Western calendar. In the year of 2023 for the Westerners, me and the Buddhists, it's 2567 BE, 2567 BE. And I was just going to make an inventory here now. Let's see, I slept in a tent in the backyard in Oakland at the residence of the guy who's in that extremely famous band, right? Whom I met because of a young girl who was an intern at the studios in New York. Jules, you know who you are. And his wife. And they let me tent out in their backyard in Oakland until I could hustle and find a place which, boy, that was bad. I stayed in a basement apartment and fought with one of the great artists of North Oakland, And then I stayed in an upstairs place with another great artist of South Berkeley. And both were these really poor apartments, and they were older women and needed people around, and I was a tenant, and I was, you know how I am. I think anybody who knows me knows how I am. You set me to do something, and I'm focused, and it'll be done better than anything or anybody else can do. But most of the time, I don't really care because I'm disappointed in all of you and in the world in general, most of my life. I'm waiting for it to get better, and so I contribute to the things that I think make it better. Okay, so we're inventorying. I've tented in a backyard. I've stayed in dingy basement apartments. As a tenant for women in their 70s who needed a renter and nobody would stay in their places. And I have slept in Central Park. That wasn't very pretty. And I have slept in Golden Gate Park, which was pretty. And I have slept in doorways in the Mission District. And I have slept on couches and, spare bedrooms of several people. I mean, many people have to be thanked. Kenny, first of all. Kenny Trice, the photographer Kenny Trice, well known in Austin and around the world, who supported me for many, 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 many years as that friend. And not only that, Kenny, we all know, is a simple fellow and will do that for many people. He is surrounded by people whom he has done that for. So Kenny, I crashed at his place up in Glen Park, long stretches up in Glen Park, and then I crashed in his neighborhood down in off of Lyon Street. No, near the Panhandle, basically. And then I crashed at his place. I never crashed at his place in Manhattan because I had my place in Brooklyn. I'm trying to think of other people. Danny, of course, I suppose, if you're talking about Kenny. And then Amy, after 9/11, she is to many people. I mean, her job is handling artists, you know what I mean? And they're much bigger and more famous than you, my friends. They're the biggest names in the business. And she is an incredibly giving person. Oh, there's so many people around the world. One time I slept on the floor. Freddie, the Frenchman who opened Dalva. One time I slept on his floor, and I got up and I had an interview that day. So I got up off his floor after we'd been drinking and partying. I shaved quickly, threw clothes on, and was like, okay, I have to go interview this guy. And Freddie looked at me. He was perfectly still. Freddie never thought much of me. I don't think he thinks much of me now. He looked at me and he was like, I could not do that. And I go, what? He goes, I could not do what you're transforming into a professional person about to go interview this guy, and I just saw you being an idiot all night, He was maybe one of the few people. He's French, and that's why. Don't you see? It's pretty interesting. French people here have always understood me in a way that others don't. By here, I mean the planet Earth. And let's see. I've slept in Dalva, and I've slept in bars, but only when they knew the owners, Not for really if I was staying in a place. I'm trying to think. There's so many, And when we talk about homelessness right now, there's definitely a discussion about homelessness that's been going on regarding, without a home, as opposed to the image of a homeless person is completely confused because we have homeless people that we see in the streets and pretend not to see. And we discuss them in rude ways and call them a blight and do horrible things to them. And we have homeless people who are homeless and really struggling and trying to do things. And that's been going on as long as I've been in the USA now. I've been a citizen for 40 years. I've seen it so many times. And I guess the upshot of this is, when I have money, I always support people who don't, and I always try to help people who are suffering, and I always try to house people who are unhoused to the extent that I can. And I've given as much as I can. I mean, I've given a lot, and including sperm, to a woman who wanted a child. And I've given a lot to people who have desires and wants and needs around me. And I've been thinking more and more about that, about homelessness and people who are unhoused because they can't find a place. And that's where this is going to end. Homelessness isn't just the homelessness you imagine or being in between. Homelessness is placelessness. And placelessness is on the rise. And the names for it, gentrification or whatever you want to call it, that has nothing. Placelessness is I had a place and now I don't have a place anymore. And that is what Israel-Palestine is about. That is what the refugees traveling all over the world right now, the millions displaced, we say displaced. So homelessness and displacement are extremely equal or related or something in a way and need to be in your mind. Because it isn't people's fault that they're misplaced. Most of the time, it's the fault of greed and the voracious capitalist culture. My instance, I plan to continue to express myself about how misplaced I am in the remaining years that I have as an Indian and an American citizen. This 10 minutes this morning is the first MTK podcast. Brought to you by me. There's no feedback button. Not sure why this thing is even out there. Except, I guess your season's coming up where you give, right? Why don't you do some giving? Do some real giving. no matter who your Lord or God is, do some real giving this year.